Hi there, I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent training. Today we're going to be talking about these words at the start of class. My apologies for the late start today. Had a family medical emergency to take care of this morning, so if you tuned in at our usual time, my apologies. Hopefully you'll find me now that I'm live, and you'll be able to watch the replay if this time wasn't as convenient for you. Everything's all right with the family now, so thank you for those of you who left me messages with your concerns. Please feel free to put your questions and requests in the chat at any time. And at the start today, we're going to talk about a recent request from one of our viewers. This viewer wanted to know about the words Furl, Furlough, Farrel, the name Farrel, and the word Farrel. So we'll talk through these words and the sounds, give you some tips and pointers, and then we'll turn to your questions. If you're just joining us, my apologies for being late. You can put your questions in the chat and I'll answer them for you in just a moment. Okay, so first of all, the word furl rhymes with the word girl, and it has a different spelling, but it has the same sound. So this is a challenging combination for a lot of people, saying the and the ul. And what I usually recommend is trying to think about it like two parts, that we have our fur and then we go to our dark L, furl, furl. You can get a lot of detailed help for words with R and L, both in my video for how to pronounce girl and world, and also in our playlists and in our Sounds of English course. We walk through R and L and then how to put them together. So basically my tongue needs to be back in that R position, which is why I recommend just saying fur at first and then sliding forward and lifting the tongue for the L. Fur, furl, furl. You might actually find it easier to say furlough, because for furlough there's a little bit more separation, whereas in furl I just have to end on the L. In furlough I can say my fur and then my low separately. And for this one, you might even build from low, furlough. Furlough has first syllable stress, same sound, and then my OUGH simply says O in this word. I do have a video for different pronunciations of words with OUGH, like enough or cough versus though and furlough. So you can check that out if that's useful for you. Then when we move to Farrel, these two pronunciations are the same. So there's a name, for example, Will Farrel, although I'm not sure if he spells his with two R's or not. But you may see two R's, you may see two L's. There's different spellings for the name Farrel, but the pronunciation has the letters AR saying the air diphthong. So I'll write that here like the word fair. You'll see it in the IPA being the air diphthong. We're gliding from a kind of an A position into our So again, trying fair by itself and then Farrel, Farrel. So with furl, I don't really have two syllables there. I do need to say it furl when I'm saying it smoothly, but to slow it down, you can make it more like two syllables. In Farrel, we actually do want to have two syllables. Farrel, and so you have a little bit more time and a little more length. Also, because I'm saying air, fair, that's going to be longer. That's a diphthong, whereas the fur is just one sound, a monophthong. And this is the same pronunciation, feral as in wild, like a feral animal, and the name Farrel. Once you can say furl, furlough, feral, and Farrel by themselves, try practicing them in some short phrases just so they come smoothly to you. So you might say, we saw the flag furl. Many workers were put on furlough during the pandemic. Will Farrel is an actor in the movie Elf, and the feral cats. There's many feral cats in Turkey. Okay, thank you for that request. And as I mentioned, now I'll turn to your questions. If you're watching live, please feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time. And if you're watching this later as a replay, you can write your questions and requests in a comment. I'll go back over those, give you answers, either add your word to my list to cover in a future word of the day, or I may already have a resource that I can send you a link to that you can check out. Okay, nice to see everyone here. Welcome. We have a question about the word that and whether it gets reduced between two words in spoken English. Yes, so I do have a video about this. Often that, as you mentioned, rather than having the full sound, it may sound a little bit more like an sound or even a schwa sound. And so, for example, I don't reduce it, like you mentioned, I don't reduce it if I'm saying that's the one. But for example, if I'm saying that's the one that did it, that's the one that I like, that's a better sentence. Not like it. I'll start over. That's the one that I like. I'll get here eventually. That will be a full sound, but this one, that's the one that I like. The one that, so yes, we definitely reduce that. In many cases, if that is not stressed or not in a certain position in the sentence, there's many opportunities for us to just reduce it and say it more like that. I would say it has a schwa, almost no vowel, just a very reduced vowel there. That's an excellent question. I think that it would be good to practice that. I think that those are other examples of where that gets reduced. Very good. We have a question about the word tedium. Tedium rhymes with medium. And so they both have the first syllable stress in tedium. It's the T sound, obviously. The letter E says that tense E sound, T, and then our letter I does another tense E here, and our letter U says the schwa, So it sounds like T, D, tedium, eum. As I move from the E to the there may be a little bit of a y glide there. You're not going to see it in the IPA necessarily, but because I'm moving from E to that gliding y sound kind of just happens there because of vowel to vowel linking. Tedium. Same thing for medium, except with a sound at the start. That's an excellent word. Thank you for that request. Okay, we have a question about if the T is silent in spoken English, if it's between consonants. For example, he must know. I just said it there because I was reading it. He must know. So when we have an ST blend or an NT blend, I can say he must know and let that T out. If I'm just saying he must, then I'm highly likely to say the T. If I'm saying he must know, I'm not just dropping it off because that would sound like he must know. If I went right from the S to the N, he must know, with a long, solid S, it would sound like this word must instead of must. So how I make it sound more like must without really saying that T must is that I use a stopped T, which means when I'm saying this phrase, my S is going to be very short. He must know. He must know. So I'm putting my tongue up for the T, blocking the air and stopping it like I would for a T, but not releasing it. He must know versus he must know. He must know. Now that's kind of a fine distinction. I think you can probably get away with just dropping the T entirely as long as your S is fairly short. He must know. He must know. Technically, I think in our fluent speech, we tend to use an unreleased T in those cases. So yes, that's a great question. Your other questions, just do it. Just do it. In that case, I'm definitely, I think, using that unreleased T because I just release it on the word do. Just do. Just do. Versus I don't want it to sound like just do. Not a long sound there. Okay, and then other phrases. Want you to read a book. Same thing. Just you and me. Just you and me. Just you and me. Yeah, again, same kind of thing if there's a consonant following. And I haven't him in weeks. I haven't seen him, yeah. NT, ST, all of these different combinations, I can either say the T or use a stopped, unreleased T if the next sound starts with a consonant. It basically follows the same rule as just a word with a T. So if I said, for example, not going. I don't say not going either. I just use that stopped unreleased T. But the same thing happens if it's an ST blend or an NT blend. Yeah, final T's and medial T's are one of the more complicated pieces for linking and for fluent speech in American English. I do go through those in a great deal of detail on individual words in our Word of the Day playlist, and then I have some videos talking specifically about the T sounds. Also in our Sounds of English course, I walk you through how we say the T in different contexts, depending on the words before and after, and how to link those to sound smoothly and smooth and fluent like a native speaker. Those are great questions. Thank you. Okay. We have a question about the word commissar, an official at a bicycle race. So my guess is it's similar to the French, where it comes from, commissar with last syllable stress. Except that we would have some secondary stress on this first syllable because we would say the ah vowel there. Commissar. Second syllable stress. So it sounds like commissar. Commissar. Double check me on the dictionary, perhaps, but based on the spelling and similar words, that would be my best guess for pronunciation of that word. Thank you. Okay, we have a question about the word after and how to pronounce the T letter in this word. Okay, so in the word after, unlike when we were talking about just do, where we had a consonant following the T, this T is followed by the vocalic R sound. So it's more like something followed by a vowel. And so because there's an F before it, it's not going to be exactly like I would say in water. In water, it's a flap T. It's the same as how we say D's in the middle. We also use a flap there. So you can think of it as a D. You don't want it a strong D. In after, it's the same kind of idea. I just need to be careful. I don't want to burst the T, not after. Also not after. I don't want a strong D, just a nice light flap. After. That's one of the difficult combinations for people sometimes, to do that flap T followed by the I do have a recent video talking about flap T plus R in words like better or in words like after. You can think about it like a T without the air releasing. Also just lifting up really quickly for the T. Some languages use it's called a flap. We use it for T and D. Some languages use it for letter R. For example, the Spanish word pero, that letter R is also the same flap sound. So if you are familiar with Spanish and you're able to use that there, you may want to do that. It's a little difficult for some people thinking about R's and T's. Try to just have a light touch up, your voice on after. Yeah, okay, definitely a challenging combination of sounds. Really great questions today. Thanks so much for being here and for being patient with our late start. Okay, we have a question about he has always been one. So when you're saying he's always been one, he has always been one. We wouldn't say the other kind of one. He has been one for a long time. He's always been one, because we don't say he's been one. We would just say he won something. So there's no confusion between these, even though they have the same pronunciation. He had always won. Yeah, so that's where the been really comes in handy for clarifying the difference between those sentences. So no worries about the confusion between, even though these both have the same pronunciation of the w, and n sounds. The context makes it very clear that you're using this one in this case. Great. Okay. Other questions, feel free to leave those in the chat at any time, and I'm going to look for some other recent requests. Yes, we have someone saying that they are forgetting what they want to ask. It's like when you call someone and you think you had something to tell them and then you can't remember it in the moment. You can come back and leave a comment if you think of it later on this video or any of my videos, because I do go through those. I collect your words and your requests and I cover them in our Word of the Day series, as well as I often already have a video talking about your word or your question or your concept, and I can direct you to that as well. Okay, very good. Another recent question. We had a question about the word gourd. So this is one that has kind of an unusual spelling, but not that unusual of sounds. So even though the letters O-U-R say our, if we're talking about something that belongs to us, our friend, in this word they just say the or diphthong. And so it rhymes with the word cord. And so just thinking about building gourd from or, gore, gourd. That would be how I would approach that word. Great. And then we have a question about the phrase charge d'affaires en pied. Okay, so this is obviously a French phrase. In English, if we were to pronounce that, I guess it's chargé. Chargé d'affaires en pied. Okay, so someone who doesn't speak French is going to struggle to pronounce this in English. If you're wondering about the translation of it, I'm not sure exactly what it means. In charge of the affairs on foot. Probably something else from the race, perhaps, race terminology. So here's the French, chargé d'affaires en pied. Don't quote me exactly. My French is not perfect. I have an accent, so I may be mispronouncing that in French. In English, we'd probably say chargé. So we would maybe Americanize those vowels a little bit. D'affaires, chargé, d'affaires, we might say en pied. So probably P-A. Chargé d'affaires en pied. Yeah, I mean, it's a little challenging to say how you would say something that's a French phrase in English. You're going to just hear people who are more closely approximating the French and less. I'm sure people who have will say it better than I did in French, and then people will just also completely mispronounce it in English, which I don't really want to teach you either. So yeah, if you're trying to use that phrase and someone's not familiar with it, you might want to write it down, and then they're going to have to look at it and see how to recognize it that way. And there's probably not a way that you could explain it in English that would make it clear to them unless you translated it into English. Okay, we have a question about the words hot versus hat. So this is a great example of in English spelling, our letter O typically says ah in a stressed syllable, and our letter A typically says ah, like in cat. So in hat, the IPA would be this, and in hot, the IPA would be an ah vowel, which I will rewrite with AH for you here. The difference between the two is in the placement. So if we look at our vowel quadrangle, for the ah vowel, the front of my tongue is down and the back of my tongue is lifted and my mouth is fairly open, but the vowel happens way in the front, because the back of my tongue is blocking the air and filling up my mouth, versus the ah in English, the back of my tongue is down. That's what the doctor says to say, see the back of your throat, say ah. That's because your tongue is down and out of the way. So if we have hat is more forward, hot, hot is more back. Depending on what your native language is, you're likely to spell this vowel with letter A in your native language, and you may or may not have this vowel in your native language. Many languages don't have that ah vowel. I do have a video specifically talking about hot and hat, and also many videos talking about what letter O says and letter A says, depending on the words and the context. And you can check those out on the channel, and also in our Sounds of English course, we walk through lots of those kinds of minimal pairs. I do have a playlist for minimal pairs like hot versus hat, and a lot of people find those helpful for distinguishing vowels and doing very similar words like that. One more thing to mention is that you may want to use other words to separate them. So for example, you could say it's not hot, and that's the man's hat, or that hat. Use words that aren't similar to each other, and then you can match. Not and hot go together, or my father feels hot, the pasta is hot. That can help you associate those two vowels together versus the a vowel. That cat, the cat in the hat, that man's cat, or that man's hat. Okay, so those are some of the tips that I recommend when it comes to similar words like yours. Okay, we have a question about lessons on the website for someone who's an intermediate level. I would recommend my American Accent 6-week course for intermediate level. Also, our Real Talk course is going to help you with, that's slightly more advanced, but it's going to help you with connecting, linking, and phrasing. The 6-week course is going to just walk you through a lot of basic patterns as well as some more intermediate and advanced phrases. And then our Sounds of English course, even though it's accessible to everyone and useful for basic learning as well, it goes into a lot of detail that an intermediate learner would probably appreciate. So those would be my top choices for you. Okay, we have a question. When someone's saying quote unquote and then they proceed to paraphrase something that was said. If I say he said quote unquote it was terrible, that may mean that I'm specifically saying someone else said he was terrible. Or you're right, it may mean that I'm just paraphrasing. Maybe the actual thing that was said was not word for word that. So if we want to give an exact quote, we might say he said, and I quote, and then we would say verbatim what was said. He said, and I quote, he was terrible. If I'm saying he said, quote unquote, and usually actually I think we use quote unquote after. So, he said he was terrible, quote unquote. That means I'm saying that because I want to say it's not my words. Maybe that I disagree with that statement and I'm using it that way. Or I may be quoting, but not quoting exactly. And so I'm not saying, this is, I'm not saying word for word, this is what was said. That's typically how that's used. Sometimes it's used in a humorous way too, to say, we're doubting the credibility of what was said, or we don't agree with it, or that's a turn of phrase that we wouldn't have chosen, but that's what was used. Okay. All right. We have a question about the uncountable noun fruit. So question is, should I say he ate 5 fruit or 5 pieces of fruit? You should say 5 pieces of fruit. If you say he ate 5 fruits, that probably means he ate an apple, a pear, a banana, 5 different fruits. He ate 5 pieces of fruit to indicate the number, 5 pieces of fruit. We wouldn't say he ate 5 fruit. You can say he ate 5 fruits, but it has a different meaning. Yes, uncountable nouns can be challenging, like where to make them plural or if they can be plural and how they work, if they're already plural. Okay, question about the word, how to pronounce Chihuahua. So in American English, we say Chihuahua. And we stress on the middle syllable, Chihuahua. She had a Chihuahua. We may use a little bit of Chihuahua, but I think pretty much use the I vowel. But, depending on your familiarity with Spanish, you might go a little bit Chihuahua, a little bit more of an E, tense E there. Okay, sorry about my talking about the courses. If you want to email me a little bit more about what you're looking to achieve in your course, I can counsel you on which course to choose. Really, I would say maybe start with the Sounds of English course. It's very inexpensive, and by the time you go through the information there, it's going to give you some ideas about how to practice. It's going to give you a strong foundation. If you finish that and you feel like you want to take something the next step, then probably step 2 would be the American Accent 6-week course. So start with Sounds of English, work your way through that, see if the teaching materials are good for you. It's not a big investment in financially. It might take a little time to work through it, but you should find that a very good starting point, regardless of what level you are in terms of your accent. I hope that's clearer to you. Okay, we have a question about how to pronounce the word annihilate. Annihilate. So we have second syllable stress here. That means letter A is going to be vowel schwa, unstressed. Sounds like And then we have the stress before the nigh syllable. So nigh, late. So stressing on nigh. I'm respelling that for you like we do in night. Nigh, late. So same as the word late, just has the A diphthong. I've rewritten that for you here with AY. So annihilate. They hope to annihilate the enemy. Okay. Yeah, tough word. Thank you very much. We have a question if there's a difference between the name fill and to fill something up. So those two are the same, and they both have the I vowel, fill. So be careful to keep the tongue a little lower and a little less tense than for feel, which is, we have feel and field, both have the E vowel. Oops, sorry, not the I, but the E vowel. So for field, it would be like if I could, that's not the past tense for feel, right? So field goes with feel. It's just basically feel plus a D. Again, if you have trouble putting that D on, just say feel and then field, add your D sound. And then lastly, fell has my vowel. And so again, you might say, I said he fell, or the men fell, same vowel. So fell is a little bit more open. My tongue's a little bit more flat. Fill, my tongue is a little higher. And then feel, my tongue is the highest and the most forward and the most tense. I do have videos for, I think, a video that talks about fill, fell, feel, etc. So after class, if I have time, I'll go back and send you a link to that. Or you can also go leave me a comment and I'll look that up for you and send you where you can find that. And again, we cover those kinds of videos, those kinds of contrasts in our minimal pairs and contrast playlist. So that can be helpful for you to find similar words to compare to. Same thing as I was mentioning before, using those other words like it's fill or it's filled, right? Same I sound. The men fell and see the field. So trying to use other words that have that same vowel to match and hear those differences. Okay, great. Excellent questions. Thank you so much. Question about how to translate quote, unquote into Spanish. Well, you might not find an exact translation for that, but based on what I described, you might think about a similar phrase that people might use when speaking Spanish. It's definitely something where you might say, you could say, he said something like this, or you can use it, you can explain. He said, this is terrible, but that's just what he said. I don't agree, or I'm not sure exactly what he said. So you can explain in more detail. Depending on what the meaning of the person using it was, if you're having to translate someone else's speech there for using quote unquote. Okay. We have a question about American pronunciation for gram. I do have a video for this, and we do pronounce it as gram in the US. In UK, I think they say more Graham with like Graham. But we say it's similar to gram with just the a vowel. And for this name, yes, I think we say that as Leahy. Leahy in U.S. English. Although the woman's name, Leah, we say that as Leah. But this is, I think, Leahy. It doesn't really match the spelling very well in terms of how we pronounce those names. Great. I do have a full names playlist, so if you're looking for a particular name, you can check that out. It may already be covered there, or you can leave me a request for your specific name. Okay. Great. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. And again, I apologize for the delay. We'll be back to our regular time next week, so you can attend then. In the meantime, I'll be covering your words and requests each day in our Word of the Day series. You can find more free resources and inexpensive online courses on our website, speechmodification.com. And if I didn't get to your question today, or you're watching this later on as a replay, do feel free to leave me a question in the comments, and I'll direct you to resources or add your word to my list to cover in a future video. Thanks so much for being here today. It was a wonderful class and great to see all of you. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. speechmodification.com. Bye, everyone. Hope to see you again soon.